Hello, this is Jeffrey Snover. Today I'm talking to the Chicago users group. And first we're going to talk about the state of the shell. But first let me tell you a little bit about what's going on here. So this is the first time I've ever given a talk this way. And I'm sort of doing my own production. What's that mean? Well, typically, you go to a conference and I just show up with my content and somebody puts everything together. This time I'm doing it myself. So I've got a very complex setup here. I've got OBS, I've got NDI, I got cameras, I got lights, I got a stream deck here, and honestly, I've got no idea what the heck I'm doing. So I'm gonna mess up quite a bit, and I apologize. I'm dog fooding this on you, but I'm gonna have some fun with it, and we'll see. I've got some great content because obviously PowerShell is great. The state of the shell. And see how we do. Okay, so first, COVID-19. Obviously the big thing to talk about. Wow. What strange times, huh? It's kind of turned the head upside, turned the world on its head. Things are very, very strange. Obviously, what I'd prefer to be doing is to give this talk to you in person, to meet you, to hear from you, get your stories. That's a key way we know whether we're on track or off track. And so that's a little bit more difficult now. Obviously, if we're in Chicago, we'd be having some great food. We'd take that architectural boat tour that I've been dying to do for years and years and years. So things are different, but I'm going to talk about how PowerShell plays a role in that, right? Now, here's the thing. The world always has been, the world is, and the world always will be a messy place, okay? And so in this time, what's really kind of highlighting what was always true, but is even more true now, is that what really matters is adaptability, resilience, robustness, and automation, okay? These things have always been important. They have never been more important than they are right now, okay? And really, I want you to think of this as that F5 moment, F5, refresh, that refresh moment. And you want to stop and figure out what serves you and what does not. And you want to invest in what serves you and drop what does not. And so, basically what the key insight I've had here is that this environment points out change is required. Change is required. And in order to change, it's not just about adding more to your plate. You have to throw some things aside. You have to figure out what's important, and you throw things aside to make room for investing in the things that are important. That's why I dropped some meetings, spend some time. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. I just spend more time. I get up earlier and invest in trying to learn some of these tools. And honestly, it takes a while. But anyway, you want to invest in yourself at this time. And that's why taking time for conferences like this is so important. Okay. And I'm just thankful, this is a great time to step back. Yes, there's a lot of difficult times, but be thankful for what you have and be thankful for the opportunity to, like this, to learn. So I want to talk about teams. My new role, I'm the technical fellow of and CTO of the Modern Workforce Transformation effort. What's that mean? Well, it's basically M365 Office, and Teams during this time of COVID has had incredible growth and adoption. I mean, just crazy. So what do we say here? Teams usage is up by 12 million in the past week. Let me say that again. 12 million in the past week. I think we recently said hitting 44 million daily active users. So guess what? That was a while ago. I think we just announced that it's like 75 million daily active users. So, I mean, Teams had been doing awesome. And then when this hit, just kaboom. Now, what's the point? Why am I talking about that? And what I mean to say is that in this time, as Teams was just rapidly accelerating, they tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, Jeffrey, it's all hands on deck. And we need you to help out and to be the executive incident manager as we're scaling up Europe, right? So basically, European demand was huge, and so middle of the night, I got up and was incident manager, which meant kind of track things, make sure everything's going well. As things get a little bit wobbly, go get the teams the assistance that they need. Now, why do I bring that up? And it's this. Oh my heavens, PowerShell was everywhere. Everywhere. It's unbelievable how much PowerShell was used. Just absolutely everything, right? For diagnostics, as things got a little bit wobbly, operations, as we're standing things up, repairing things, provisioning things, PowerShell, PowerShell, PowerShell. The number of times I saw a PowerShell script posted into a Teams channel. Oh, we're going to run PowerShell to do this. Oh, we need to write a PowerShell script to do that. And the interesting thing was, things just worked. I mean, we went through this incredible surge in adoption, and the wheels stayed on the bus. And I'll tell you that it was a stressful period, and the qualities of PowerShell, its verbosity and its clarity, were really a gift. I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but basically, sort of the core design of PowerShell was influenced by a pretty traumatic business trip I had long ago, where I spent basically 9 days at the Elvis Presley Memorial Trauma Center, sleeping on the data center floor, getting woken up by a hospital administrator saying, "Jeffrey, you gotta, patients can't be admitted into the hospital because of your software." Like, my software, oh good Lord. And so then I'm waking up 3 in the morning and I'm stitching together these database records as early beta software. And stitching together these database records. And I was not at my best. And I thought to myself, boy, I can't believe the tools I have to deal with this situation. When it's tense like this, when it's tough like this, you want to have nice, verbose tools. When you open up a script that didn't go right, you want to know what it did. I was thinking to myself, boy, in that environment, you ran a script and it didn't go right, and you had to figure out why, and it's a Perl script. I mean, that's it. That'd just be the worst thing in the world. But you bring up a PowerShell script, you can read it, you know exactly what went on. So, and the interesting thing about this was, as we were surging up, where'd that capacity come from? Yes, we were buying as many computers as the supply chain would allow, but the demand far outstripped the capacity to buy those and bring those online. So as we were bringing things up, we also had to bring other things down to say, hey, let's reduce some of the inefficiency, let's introduce a little bit more risk. And whether it was scaling up or scaling down, PowerShell was there, and PowerShell was your friend, and it was a wild success, so happy days. Okay, so Clausewitz, the famous theoretician, once said, "To secure peace is to prepare for war." Well, I have a variation on that, right? To secure calm is to prepare for drama, okay? So you gotta prepare for drama, and that's what PowerShell is all about, preparing for drama. You learn your tools, you learn the skills, you learn the patterns, and then when the mess comes, because the mess will come, you can be calm. You can look at the script, know what the script did. You can investigate something, you got to do something, you can guess about what you want to type, you type it and you get it. Not quite exactly what you want, you can investigate, iterate. You have the skills because you prepared, okay? Attending this conference is a step in preparing, this user group, step in preparing. So the real point I want to make here is PowerShell has been PowerShell 7 is the 20-year story of preparing you for drama. PowerShell is all about you. PowerShell is all about you. It's about your success. It's about making you be the hero of your organization. In fact, so much so that let me go back to that. So much so that we even have what we call the sacred vow, right? The sacred vow. How many products and technologies have you worked with that made you a sacred vow? And yet we have that. And our sacred vow is you invest in learning PowerShell, And we vow to you to make it one of the best investments you've ever made by continuing to invest in this technology so that you become more valuable over time. And so you're going to see how PowerShell 7 continues and fulfills that sacred vow to you. Again, 20-year journey. If you want to hear more about the details, Don Jones has recently published a book about that. Don reached out to me, and I connected him up with a lot of the early, PowerShell, and in fact, Monad people, the program managers, etc. And he reached out to them, got their stories, and put it into this book, The Shell of an Idea. Here's a URL. I think it's a pretty great book, and I think it provides the full story of PowerShell. I think there's this false narrative of, PowerShell equals Jeffrey. That's not at all true. Yes, I came up with a lot of the original ideas, the core architecture, the Monad Manifesto, that was mine. But the reality is, the thing I'm proudest of is the fact that the Monad Manifesto and the architecture that I put in place allowed these awesome engineers to come in and contribute and add their awesomeness in a way that produced a coherent experience. Right? Bill Gates used to always say, we're really good at finding and hiring the world's best people. We just suck at getting their IQs to add up. And indeed, that's a very hard job. You got a great idea here and you got a great idea there. Doesn't necessarily mean that those two together are going to be a great idea. Okay. And so the great thing about PowerShell is that we were able to do it in a way that the IQs added up. Lee Holmes and his awesome work on security was able to add his thoughts. Bruce Payette, with his incredible knowledge, along with Jim Truer, produces fantastic language. Ken Hansen with his great ideas around namespace and modules. All these ideas were able to be added in a way that didn't conflict. Anyway, the nice thing about this book is it tells those stories and it tells the drama. A lot of these stories have never been told before. A little bit of behind the scenes. I think some of that. Obviously I was demoted to go work on PowerShell. That was very painful. I kind of tell the rest of that story in this. It's one of those, it was a very just painful period. So all those great stories are in this book. I encourage you to read it. Happy days, fun stuff. So again, I mentioned to you our sacred vow. Our sacred vow is this: you learn PowerShell and your value will continue to appreciate over time. Again, whenever you think PowerShell, you think this: the PowerShell team is investing in me, right? That's the thing. We are investing in you. It's all about you. It's not about me. It's not about the PowerShell team. It's not about the technology. It's about you and your success. That's our mindset. That's what we come up today. Every day we show up to work with that as our mindset. By the way, that's why it's so important for you to engage with us, right? You need to tell us where it's working. You need to tell us, more importantly, where it's not working so that we can invest in you. And you'll see also how we've made it open source so that the community can invest. You can invest in it as well to help yourself and your fellow people. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the evolution of PowerShell. As I say, it's a 20-year journey. Now, interesting point, 20-year journey. What does that mean? Well, a lot of times Microsoft gets all hot and excited about something, and then we get distracted and move on. That's not been the case with PowerShell, right? At some point, I talked to an executive of a company who had just made a huge bet on PowerShell, right? Product bet on PowerShell. And I said, it's great. Why did you do that? And he said, indeed, he pointed out, Microsoft runs hot and cold on technologies. He says, but PowerShell is a story of continued and enduring investment. He says, that's something I can bank on. And indeed, we continue to invest in PowerShell. So PowerShell version 1 through 2, this is back to that comment I made. The world always has been, the world is, and the world always will be a messy place, right? And you had COM, you had the registry, you had Win32 APIs, you had files, you had .NET, you had WMI, you had SIM, big mess. And so what PowerShell version 1 and 2 was all about trying to provide a way, a glue, so that you could combine all these tools into a coherent way, and right, so that you could access and manage all the things you needed to access, and to put it in a high level, task-oriented abstraction, right, with strong verb-noun guidelines, so that you could think about what you want, type it, and get it. Okay, so it was really, beginning was all about gluing together the messy world. Then from 3 to 5, right, we started to add remoting, and we shifted more to management of domains, right? Management of the networking, of the security. By the way, in the first version, I think, what do we have? Like 100 and some odd commandlets, 100, 200, small number of commandlets. I remember at some point, once we got WMI commandlets, this number, I think that was in 3, we went from a couple hundred to like over 1,200 commandlets. This is when now you could manage everything, right? You could manage Hyper-V, you could manage storage, identity, security, and you can manage it here, or you could reach out and manage remote machines and large quantities of remote machines. That's one of the things I think people don't give PowerShell credit enough for, and that is our focus in on scalability. When we did numbers where you say, hey, I want to run this script block on thousands of machines. In fact, it was tens of thousands of machines, and it ran just fine, right? So that's what we had in mind, this very massive scalability. With PowerShell 6, it was all about ubiquity. Now, again, what did I say? A continued investment. So, hey, we got all this great coverage, we got remoting, but we kept going forward. PowerShell 6, and by the way, this is PowerShell 6 Core. Now, notice that Core. Core basically meant in order to get ubiquity, right? So what is ubiquity? It runs in Azure, it runs on ARM, in Azure's ARM, it runs in AWS, it runs in GPC, it runs in VMware, right? It runs in Linux, runs in Mac OS, Linux, Mac OS, Microsoft, Linux, Mac OS, what? Yeah, and so basically here we had to shift gears from .NET to .NET Core. .NET Core is a small subset, or version 1 was a small subset of .NET, but it was portable. And the team did an incredible amount of work in order to refactor and get on .NET Core. It is hard to overstate the amount of work and grunt work that the team invested in for you, okay? Because honestly, we had people like, why are we doing this? Full PowerShell, PowerShell on the full .NET framework is rich. There's this backlog of things people are telling us you need, and yet we're not doing that for well over a year. It's like a year and a half to go invest and do all this hard grunt work, only to end up with something that is portable but has less functionality. And the answer is yeah. And the reason why is it then allows, we're investing in the future of you, right? That this is now a tool that you can use. As your company says, hey, we're not just a Windows shop, we're a heterogeneous shop. Hey, we're not just an Azure shop. We might use AWS, or we might use Google. We use Windows, and we use VMware. We wanted this to be the tool to manage everything. And so that's what we did. And I'll tell you that, honestly, we lost some of the team members. Some of the people just said, that's not the way I want to spend the next year of my life. And we said, no, sorry to see you go, but it's not about you. It's about our customers. And this is what our customers are going to need. Now, notice is in this square here, circle, it's not fully covered. Okay. So in fact, that was one of the challenges we had with .NET PowerShell Core. Was it was awesome, but it didn't meet the full coverage. There were some things that you could do in Windows PowerShell that you couldn't do in PowerShell Core. If you could do it in PowerShell Core, awesome. It was much, much faster, by the way, but you couldn't do everything. I also want to talk here about the distributions. Part about ubiquity is there were different ways to get the software, And we invested a lot of time in making it so you could get it no matter what mechanism you used, right? So there's Snap and there's Docker, made it easy to work with CI/CD pipelines. It's in the .NET Global tool. You can Xcopy deploy it. You just sort of can't, swing a cat without hitting away to get PowerShell on your system. We also then updated it, right? So in this modern world, right? What did I say? The world always has been, is, and always will be a messy world. Why is that? Well, it always was a messy world, always has been a messy world because there's such variation. At various times we say, hey, no, this is the right way to do it. Like, oh, we're going to have CECs, get everybody to do things the one way, get on, this technology or that technology. But then guess what? There's innovation. And innovation then says, oh, well, that's different than the way it is today. So you always have to be innovating. And that's why the glue, why PowerShell as a glue makes so much sense. So there was a new way of doing APIs, REST with JSON documents. And so we invested heavily in those to make that a full first-class citizen. And we also switched from an exclusively WinRM focused on remoting to WinRM and SSH. Okay, so SSH is the normal, traditional way of doing remoting in Linux. So now you can do both environments. The point here is Core 6 was focused in on ubiquity. And that's what he's saying here. Outside the shell, there was temporarily some compatibility on Windows that we lost. Now PowerShell 7. Do you see that circle slide in? Now PowerShell 7 is the full thing. Okay, so .NET Core has continued to do refactoring. They continue to invest and do a great job. And so now more and more of the Windows APIs are available. And all these commandlets that in the past weren't there are now there. So PowerShell 7, and notice we dropped the word core, right? So in the 6 time frame, there was Windows PowerShell and there was PowerShell Core. Windows PowerShell ran on, you guessed it, Windows. PowerShell Core ran everywhere but Core. PowerShell Core is a qualified PowerShell, right? Qualified because it didn't do everything that Windows PowerShell did. Now the name is PowerShell 7. It is ubiquitous and it is full. This is the version you want to get on because it does everything you need and runs everywhere you want it to go. By the way, one thing I want to point out, I'm just so proud that when we launched PowerShell Core in 6.0 timeframe, we had our launch partners were VMware, AWS, and Google Cloud. Now, how crazy is that? And again, Microsoft, your launch partners are VMware, AWS, and Google Cloud. Those are not traditional Microsoft launch partners, right? And the reason why they were our launch partners is because this isn't about Microsoft. This isn't about PowerShell. This is about you. This is about your success. And these are environments, tools that you use. And so, of course, we had to get them on board. And yeah, when we called them up and said, hey, we'd like to work with you, there was a, but what? But the reality is that time has shown us to be true. We are all about you. And so there was a natural fit with these partners, and that's been going very well. So the gestalt of 7, again, kind of said that. Windows PowerShell was all about simple automation and management of Windows servers. PowerShell Core was universal across operating systems and clouds. But PowerShell 7, the ring to rule them all, the version to rule them all, is about automation, management, deployment of cloud, on-premises, and hybrid resources at scale and arbitrary complexity. Great. Also, PowerShell 7 added some great stuff, great set of features. We added parallel for each. People have seen huge improvements in this. I'll show you an example of this in a second. But basically, write some code, add one switch, and people see improvements of 100x speed improvements. We had one guy say, oh, the script used to take a couple hours, and now it takes a couple minutes. Now, this is not magic pixie dust, right? It is not something you can put on everything and everything gets faster. In fact, sometimes if you use it inappropriately, it will go slower. Okay, so you got to understand what it does. So let's give you an example of it. Okay, switch to demos. It's working. Okay, so let's do this. 1.10 pipe 2 for each minus process, and we'll just give the name. And then let's do this. Start sleep 1 second. Okay, and what do you get? 1 sleep a second. Next, 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 next. Okay, slow, right? But it gets the job done. So now where you could say process, by the way, that was always optional, but then if you want parallel, it's not optional. You then say parallel. Oh, because I'm in the wrong version. There you go. Remember I said I was going to make a lot of mistakes? Okay, so let's do this again. Here we go. PowerShell 7. Now, say parallel. What the hell am I doing? Cannot be resolved. I can't spell. That's what it is. Parallel. Oh, I'm such a dope. By the way, it's one of the things I love to do. So here, let's get this in focus, right? I invented PowerShell. I've been working on it for about 20 years. I am a Microsoft Technical Fellow. Microsoft Technical, that's the highest individual contributor Microsoft has. I've been in the business 40 years, and I make mistakes all the time. And I go out of my way to not edit these things out. I don't edit them out because I want you to see that mistakes are normal. Mistakes happen all the time. So then when you make mistakes, don't beat yourself up, right? I don't know, there's this MLB, mean little in your head that says, oh, you shouldn't make mistakes. Oh, you're not worthy. You're just whenever you see that stuff, just think about, hey, that guy made all those mistakes. I'm doing great. Give yourself a break. Okay, so let's try this again. Spelling parallel correctly. Boom. Do you see that? Oh, wait, notice the behavior. It's a little bit odd behavior. So 1 to 5 and then 6 to 10 really quickly. So what's up with that? And there's this thing called throttle limit. Throttle limit. And the throttle limit is 5. So let's show you what throttle limit 1 does. And that controls throttling. Okay, it throttles. And it controls how many things happen at once. So if you set the throttle limit to 1, it's the same as not being parallel. Okay? And if you want to, you can set the throttle limit to, let's say 100. Boom, they happen all at once. Okay, so you can control that. Now, why 5? And this is interesting because it highlighted the 2 use cases for parallelism. I saw this and I said, guys, you got the number wrong. What the hell are you doing? That number should be like, 64 or 160, some very large number. Why'd you set it to 5? And they said, well, because that's how many, because basically there's 2 scenarios for parallel. One is, hey, how can we consume all the compute resources on a machine? Which is to say, hey, I've got 4 or 5, n number of cores, and instead of just consuming 1 core, we want to be able to use all of them, bring all of those resources to bear to solve a problem. And it's like, oh yeah, that's a great use of parallel. But I use parallel in a completely different model, right? For me, it's to manage latency, right? And idleness, which is to say, imagine I'm going to do some remoting and I want to do something and something takes time, Okay, if it takes time, then I'm not consuming the CPU. I'm just waiting for something. And while I'm waiting, I can do something else, even with just one core. And so that's where you have the two use cases. That's why I added the sleep. Now notice here, right, when you do this, imagine you saw the behavior when it was 1, right? But imagine this was 5, right? And 2, right? So this is going to take forever. This is going to be just horrible, right? But you see 100, boom. What the heck? Oh, right, because it's sleeping at the end. Here. Yeah, there you go. So you get the idea. So for each, pretty freaking awesome. Oh, by the way, let me go back to that. So I don't know if you saw this. So what do I got here, right? $PS version. Remember I told you I made a mistake? Version table. So this is 7.1 preview running on Windows. Okay, by the way, I'm using the amazing new terminal window. Okay, oh, let me start something here. Here, okay, so now I got 5.1 running the desktop. So the new Windows terminal, if you haven't used it, it's tabbed, it's wonderful. Here, I've got the local version. Oh, it does work. I'm just such a dope. This is Ubuntu, and if I spelled it right, wrong, happy days. So PS version table. This is Linux. It's in fact Ubuntu running in WSL on the same machine. Okay, and so this is 7. This was 7.1. And then in Azure, I've got 7 running on Linux. Okay, so basically, remember I said, we want to make it easy for you to run PowerShell wherever. And by the way, okay, so let's have some fun here. So what did I say? I said, okay, so this is, I wish I had older versions. Okay, so get command to measure. So this is PowerShell 7.1. Okay. 12,937 commandlets. 12,937 commandlets. 12,000. Remember I said version 1 had like 100 and some odd, and we had this big breakthrough where we hit like got WMI coverage. We got like over 1,000. So this is PowerShell 7, 12,000. Blah, 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 blah. Just craziness, right? Okay, now, okay, that's Windows. Here we are on Linux. I don't know what the number is going to be. Get command to measure. Okay, 10,073. So anyway, you have great and full coverage. It's fantastic. All right, let's go back. That was fun, huh? All right, we've also made it easier to diagnose errors. Okay, so we have a new error view and a new commandlet, get error. Best way to talk about that, show it back to my demo. By the way, okay, so let's go here, 7, CLS. Let's do this, stop process minus ID 13. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Nice pithy error message. Really? Well, yeah, what's the difference? Well, in the past, $error view is called concise view. What does these be? Okay. Oh, wait, that's the way you do. I couldn't remember the name. Remember, I got bad memory. So what you can do is just type it to something, and it tells you what the error is. Here's what the values are. So now I'll say normal view. I'll do this again. This is the way it used to be, okay? So lots of red, lots of complex stuff. And so now, with concise view, how do you spell concise? No. Concise view. nice, concise error message. Okay. Additionally, let's see, /test1. I've got a file here. Let's cat that. See, there you go. I spelled parallel again wrong. Okay, so let's say I'm going to run this thing. And now look at this, right? So notice the use of color. Okay, we show the line. It's line number 3. Highlight where it went wrong, and you get the error message. So these error messages are really very good. Okay, but now imagine you say, okay, but I lost something. The other one provided me a little bit more information. Sure, and if you want that, you can have it. You say get error. And now you get that and a lot of information. So remember, in the past, you'd like, oh, $error, pipe to format, list. Oh, but no, then you got to do -4. So I don't know if you ever did that, but and then it was just a pain in the butt as you had to navigate things. Because anyway, so now all the information you want, if you have to debug something, is available here. Okay, look at this. This is so if you have some support issue, you do this, it gives you all the information, kind of walks things down, gives you the stack trace, etc. So a lot more richer view of errors. And backward compatibility. So with backward compatibility, now, basically went through and made sure that a bunch of those, well, one, .NET expanded to support more commandlets, more APIs, so more commandlets worked. Next is we went and said, hey, for these command modules, we'll go and declare them to be, the teams declare them to be whether they work in core or work in desktop. And then some you'll see, they say desktop, but they work in core. That's because we did the work and found it out and weren't able to get the team to update that. But things that we know work, we'll update that. And then we added this compatibility layer, Windows compatibility. And if you want here, this aka.ms/PS module compat, that link right here, that gives you lots of details and documentation about the compatibility of 7. But basically, PowerShell 7 fulfills the sacred vow by continuing to invest in it and making you more valuable. Now let's go talk about this compatibility because it is crazy cool. And by the way, now I'm going to go down a rabbit hole, but it's just so much fun. And what I want to do is to say PowerShell is fun. You should go down the rabbit hole. You should have some fun with it and explore, okay? Because there's some crazy cool stuff here. Now, back to my demo. Again, PS version. Okay, so this is 7.0, but it would work. Well, here, no, let's get, that's preview. Let's get PowerShell 7. Do I have PowerShell 7? I didn't. This is it. Okay, this is PowerShell 7. Okay, so this is 7. Now, here's the gotcha, right? So I'll say get module -list. All right, this is going to take a while because there's so many. What did they say? 1,300 commandlets? Just crazy, crazy. First time it does this, it produces a cache. So then after that, it's a lot quicker. But what you're going to see is okay, there you go. So now what you're seeing is, notice here it says core and desktop, okay? And look, most of them there, some are only desktop. In fact, these aren't. We've determined that they work, and so we'll automatically load them. You'll be able to automatically use this. And here's the problem. I wanted to show you something we call the PS module compatibility. And unfortunately, it's hard, right? In the past, it used to be you could find a module that didn't work and run it. Now, there's so many work, I don't know off the top of my head have one. But I'm going to show you how it would work anyway. Here's the conceptual model you have to have in place. Okay. Here's the conceptual model you have to have in place. What is a commandlet? A commandlet is a high-level task-oriented abstraction that you interact with and get your job done. Now, how is a commandlet implemented? Who cares, right? The answer is it just gets the job done. So in fact, a lot of the early commandlets were run as .NET code in your process. But remember I talked about how version 3, we went from a couple hundred commandlets to over 1,000? The reason why is that we were able to run commandlets backed by WMI. And in fact, we just had so much WMI coverage, this worked out really well. So what happened with those commandlets? And the answer is, you have the same high-level task-oriented abstraction, but what in fact happens is we use a WMI protocol to talk to a remote process, okay? And that process is the WMI agent, and then that agent typically talked to another process, which was the code running the stuff, ran, executed, produced a WMI object. So it goes from process to process back to me, and then you get the result. And yet to you, it just type high-level task-oriented abstraction, you get your job done, and you don't really kind of see the behind the scenes. So here's the thing. We can do the same thing with PowerShell version 5. So imagine that there's some API. I said that .NET had done a great job bringing most of the Windows APIs and refactoring them, not all. So imagine there's some commandlet out there that uses something that's not available in .NET Core, but you need that commandlet. What do? And the answer is you can run, have a commandlet here that then talks to a process. What's that process? Process is PowerShell version 5. It then runs the commandlet there and returns the object back here. If only we had a remoting protocol. Oh, we do. It's called PowerShell remoting. Okay, so let's see how that works. I'm going to use the trusted module platform here. Okay, so just to get that in focus, right? Get TPM. Boom, we get that. Now imagine, okay, so again, it works, so there's a problem. Imagine it didn't work, right? And that I want to run get TPM, but it doesn't work because it only runs in PowerShell version 5. What can I do? And the answer is this. First, I'll show you something. Get PS session. Notice I got no PowerShell sessions, no remoting sessions. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say import module, this thing, and I'm going to say use Windows PowerShell. Okay, use Windows PowerShell. That's saying use the PowerShell remoting. So it's basically going to say, hey, use PowerShell version 5, import it there, and make some proxies here. And then I'll say minus verbose. Oh, sorry. So at this point, it's going to create the same commandlets as the ones I already have, and that's an error. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say prefix them with, let's just say, Windows, W, yeah, Windows, and verbose. Okay. So what happened was we fire up a process, import that module there, create proxies here, and the proxies now have the name W. So if I say get command G TPM, notice I have get TPM, that's the one that worked, screwing up my demo. And here's this get WPM. Now notice this is a function, okay? So now when I say get WTPM, boom, just happened. So what really happened? Well, it was a commandlet that went across PowerShell remoting to a PowerShell version 5 commandlet, ran there, returned the results here. So now remember I ran get PowerShell session. Look there, that's the session that I'm using. Now, let's have some fun. Get module. Okay. So now I got both these things. This is the script one, so that's the one that got created. Okay. $M equals get module. Remoting. Geez, I'm not sure which one that's going to give me. Well, let's see. Gives me two. Okay, so here's the nice trick. So there's the one I want and the one I don't want. Okay, so I want the second one. So I'll say $X and $M. So what that does is, because there's two, the first one gets assigned to the first variable, the second one gets assigned to the second variable. I'm just going to ignore the first one, and this is the one I want. How fun's that? Okay, now here's where it gets crazy. So I don't know if you know this, but you can actually execute code in modules. Remember I talked to you about Kenneth Hansen. Kenneth Hansen did a great job along with Bruce Payette in designing these modules. and designing them in a way that you basically, they're the separate isolated environment where as you go, they may have a whole bunch of work that needs to get done in order to meet the contract that you want, right? So the contract is get VTPM. But in order to do that, it has a whole bunch of helper routines. Instead of bringing those into your environment and screwing up your environment and potentially stepping on stuff that you already have, it keeps it in a separate environment, right? So a module is a scope. Nice thing about that is you can then run code there. Ampersand, $. Ampersand's the invoke command, $module, and then you can run something here, right? So print working directory, you can run any code you want. Okay, you can say dir function. And notice here are the functions, get TPM, clear TPM, and then all this, get implicit stuff. Anyway, so there's a ton of great stuff there. Those are the mechanics that allow me to export this, get VTPM. Again, let's see how that works. Get TPM, that's local in process, pretty quick. Get VTPM, what did I do? I messed that up. Anyway, happens very, very quickly. Okay, so that's that. Remember I mentioned I was going to screw a bunch of stuff up? You couldn't see any of that, could you? I have no idea where I screwed up. Let's just keep going. Okay, here's some telemetry. PowerShell is doing awesome. The numbers have just skyrocketed. Now, going forward, PowerShell version 7. PowerShell version 7, there's a wave of investments here, right? Now here what I want to talk to you about is the PowerShell 7.1 wave of Microsoft investments. Why do I tee it up that way? I tee it up that way because one, PowerShell 7 is a community effort, right? And there are things we're going to do, but there's things the community is going to do. I don't know what the community is going to do. So I'm going to talk to you about what things we're investing in. And here are the things we're investing in. One is the ability to innovate outside of the engine. Two, to improve the tooling around PowerShell. Three, to improve our RFC process. And then lastly, to really focus in on the shell, the interactive experience, the next generation shell experience for PowerShell. First, innovating outside the engine. You know, the key thing we want to do here is to say, hey, we want to have the maximize innovation and stability. Maximize innovation and stability. How do you do that? Well, one way to do that is the things that can affect stability, you want to innovate at a different rate than the things that don't affect stability, right? So the core engine, boy, you want to be very careful about that. But stuff that's not commandlets, etc., you can go pretty quickly on, okay? So how do we do that? Modules, 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 modules. So in fact, what you're going to see is a lot of innovation being done in the module, being delivered in the module space. And one of the nice things about that is we can also, some of these things we can make available to existing environments. But then fold them into 7.1, which is to say, hey, like we're going to talk about secrets. Secrets work on PowerShell version 5. It's delivered as a module, works on PowerShell version 5, and then it'll ship in 7.1. Secrets management. We're going to focus in on secrets management. And this is a universal module for storing and retrieving secrets. And the idea here is it's a provider model. Right, there's lots of different companies and ISVs that have a business around storing and retrieving secrets. Think Azure Key Vault. AWS has one. Third parties will have others. And what we're going to do is we're going to provide a generic way for you to say, hey, here's who I'm using as a key provider, like to use them. In fact, I think I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. Why don't I talk about it now, and if I do, I'll just skip over it later. Sorry, I forgot my slides. So what you do is we're super hardcore about not keeping secrets in code, not keeping secrets in code, right? Because the code gets out, your secret gets out, no bueno. And that's why we have PS credential. Happy days. But it turns out that there are more secrets than just credentials, right? API keys are secrets as well. And what some people who didn't realize that did, and then put those, sample code on somewhere that was publicly available, somebody grabs their API keys, and then they get bills for tens of thousands of dollars as someone grabbed that and then used it for Bitcoin mining or some nefarious means. So what we want to do is we want to say all of your secrets, you never keep any of them in your code. And so you want to store your secrets somewhere, then get the secret and use them. And then the challenge with that is, well, there are different secret providers. And so the idea is like, hey, you can write your code once, and then the individual customer can say, hey, I want to run this script, but I want to use my secret provider. Okay, so that's the model here. And then Jupyter Notebooks. Jupyter Notebooks are amazing. We're investing heavily in those. Right now, they're available in the Azure Data Studio Jupyter Notebooks, but then we're also working to make them available everywhere. So Jupyter has this idea of a kernel, and a kernel is where you run the code, where you run code, and .NET has an interactive Jupyter kernel, which basically says a lot of different languages can run. So what's this all mean? Jupyter Notebooks are a combination of markup and code. Maybe it's best if I just show you one. Okay, so this is Azure Data Studio. Okay, it is a Jupyter notebook. Now notice it's kernel. You have different kernels. You have SQL, Spark, Python, PowerShell, and then you can attach it to various places, okay, local host or remote machines, etc. And what you have here is you have documentation, right? So this is markup code. Talk about the help system, demonstrates this, etc. And then it's here, and notice this arrow. So now you can run this code. So get help, get star, and you run this code. Notice the circle here, and then it runs in process. Okay, runs in line, and you see the results. Okay, so if you want to, you can go down, run the next one. Okay, that was pretty cool. It's a problem with help. That's a problem with coverage. It's so large. So let's do this. I'll then make the point in line here. So the point is, imagine I just said A, get help A. So you can now edit and run things in line. A, something that then starts with A and ends with T. So the point is, Jupyter Notebooks have documentation. Hey, here's this, has an example. You can run the example, and then you can modify and start to explore things. And notice here it said, now, am I limited to get help? No, you can change this entire line, right? Notice it said, check out get verb. Oh, what does that mean? Let's copy this. Can I run get verb here? Yeah, you can run get verb. You run get, you can run, I wonder what this is version. Yeah, run PS version table. You run any code you want. Okay, so this is 5.1, the desktop. But again, the point here is that this gives you documentation and then code that you can then run. Okay, well, that's interesting. Get help on .NET Core. Fun stuff. Anyway, so I expect these to be used quite extensively and really to transform training. Right? You have the documentation, you have the sample, and right. So often you're in some talk and then you're like, oh, that's very cool. I want to try that. And then you look at the slide and you got to type things down and blah, blah, blah. Or you're in one window and you go to another window. No. Here are your lab materials. Here's the documentation. Go run this command. Oh, that's cool. Modify it. Run it again. So you can iterate and experiment. Pretty great stuff. And more and more modules becoming from the PowerShell team itself. I mentioned improved tooling. Two primary investment areas here: PowerShell version PowerShell Get version 3. This really is an F5 moment, a hit refresh. Whole new implementation focused in on performance, stability, and simplicity. We've got a much simpler interface. It's much more intuitive. The real focus here was to better integrate in with CI/CD pipelines and serverless environments. So it's very, very fast, very lightweight, very intuitive. The other major investment in tooling is around Visual Studio Code extensions. Here we've got performance, stability. If you've tried this in the past and said, kind of dodgy, didn't quite work for me, works fine now, very, very fast. The debugging works great. We're making improvements to our RFC process. The RFC process, if you've tried it in the past, is basically, here's the challenge. We have to innovate, and we have to innovate in a way that the IQs come together and preserve stability. Remember, I mentioned innovation and stability. So we have so many people saying, hey, what about X? What about Y? What about Z? We've got the team who has to stop coding and go evaluate those things. And honestly, we're new to this. We're getting better. And this process is the next iteration. I don't think we've been as good as we wanted to be at this. We haven't evaluated as many as we would like to. We haven't been as fast and responsive as we'd like to. So we're going to revamp that process to be able to maximize throughput while maintaining coherence of the environment. This is the draft RFC process. Don't try and read it. Lots of details there. Oh, by the way, I want to go back here a second. So there's a misconception. I want to make sure it's really super clear. Some people felt like, oh, if I write up an RFC and it gets approved, the PowerShell team's going to go implement it. No, we're going to be really clear about the things we're going to invest in. Happy days. RFCs, we may choose to implement an RFC. That's how we're telling you about what we're investing in. But if you want to make an investment in PowerShell and you write an RFC and we say, yeah, that's good, you need to go implement it or get a cohort to go implement it. It doesn't mean you get to draw upon the resources of the PowerShell team. That's not to say that we don't want to hear about what you do, about what you want, but it's not an automatic thing. Okay, sometimes we're going to hear about what's needed, and if it's broad enough, we will go invest in that. But if something sounds cool, but it's narrow, requires a lot of work, and we think, yep, it's coherent, fits in with PowerShell, but it's not not the investment of our resources that's going to benefit the most people at the most time. We're going to approve it, but then we're not going to implement it. You'd have to implement that. So basically, the idea here is to leverage experts more and leverage PowerShell modules more. So basically, the idea is, hey, does this idea, does it need to be in PowerShell or can it be in a module? If it's in a module, like, go with God. Next is, hey, a lot of times we found ourselves spinning in conversations where some simple code could have highlighted the issues more quickly. So we're going to try and encourage people to do more of that, more experimentation, and then to set up these experts where the experts can take the bulk of the conversation to a certain degree. We don't need the full committee involved. And then the experts can kind of shepherd it, to a different path. Yeah, that's good. Do it by yourself. Or yeah, let's bring it into the main committee. Now, in terms of this next generation shell, the experience here, a lot of things basically going back to trying to be a better interactive shell. A lot of work on tab completion, looking to leverage some artificial intelligence, understanding of past behaviors of other people to be better at predicting things, suggesting things, a much richer help experience. We're also improving the way basically we're making it better for scripting, better interactive shell, and better programmatic shell. Okay, and the programmatic shell, we're looking a lot at error handling. There's some things that Bash does that we find are better, in particular the way they handle errors that occur in native commandlets. So we're exploring that. And then we're working through the backlog of contributions. The community's told us about a bunch of things, and we're working through those. Want to take a moment and pause and thank all the amazing community contributors. If you are one of those, thank you very much. Really, PowerShell has grown in scope and in relevance and in quality due to the community. Actually, I forgot to mention one of my favorite, by far my favorite PowerShell version 7 feature, and that is the hundreds and hundreds of small little additions that were made. Things that aren't top-level features. But it just really, if you use PowerShell 7, what you'll find is it just has this fit and finish. Things just work better. The commandlets have all the options that you wish that they did. And largely that is because of the community, right? The community goes and says, hey, why doesn't it do this? And what they look and they say is, hey, I can control that. I can do that. If PowerShell's team's not going to get to it, I'll go code that. And we've welcomed those people with open arms, and they've done a lot of great work, and you benefit from it. So hats off to you. We also, as I mentioned PowerShell, what we're investing in. PowerShell is no longer Microsoft's, right? PowerShell is the community's. PowerShell is not the gatekeeper to everything that goes. Sorry, Microsoft is not the gatekeeper for everything that goes in PowerShell. Some of the gatekeepers are in the community, right? So Ilya has been doing great. He's one of the maintainers. Ilya can go and decide, hey, we ought to add these things and put them in there. He's gotten great help from Stefan and Joel on triaging things. On the editor services and Visual Studio, Keith and Patrick have been doing fantastic stuff. So if you like Visual Studio Code, say thank you to these folks. And then Christopher has been just doing awesome on PowerShell Script Analyzer. So in summary, PowerShell 7 continues to make you more productive at scale and in hybrid efforts, right? Again, PowerShell 7's all about you. It has been a 20-year journey to make PowerShell 7, and really we're just at the beginning. There's miles to go before we sleep. And really, we're investing in you. You should invest in you. Attending these sessions is a great first start, but continue to do it. I find that it's far better to spend, half an hour every day than to take a week and try and do something. It's better to learn, it's better to have a continuous habit, etc. But certainly taking time to invest in user groups, invest in the community are a great start. So thank you very much for your time. Sorry about that mess up earlier. Have a great conference.
Our next sessions. I did see here in chat, is a Microsoft PowerShell certification being considered?
We've talked about that since the early days. And, the early days, it was, no, you don't want to do that because, if it was a business, and being a business meant that if you had a certification and they didn't earn a ton of money, then they were going to drop it like a hot potato. And then they'd never pick it up again. And then there would be this perception that Microsoft was dropping it and blah, blah, blah. So you didn't want to do it until you did it, until you knew you were going to make a ton of money on this certification, as crazy as that seems. And then later we looked at it and we said, well, getting certified in PowerShell is like sort of getting certified in the mouse and the keyboard. Like, yeah, it's just a basic skill. Why would you be certified in that? So certified in like the domain, certified in Exchange, certified in Windows Server Management, that made sense. But PowerShell, it sort of never made sense.
Good point. I saw another good question here that came up. I think, this is a pretty common question. It comes up a lot, but as an absolute beginner, given that we're at the top of the charts on Twitch and science and technology right now, we may have some people coming to the channel that have never used PowerShell. Maybe they're just getting started. And they just want to know, how do I start? So I think, Jeffrey, your perspective on that would be really interesting to hear, actually.
Yeah, so always it's best to just start, just explore, right? I will tell you that Microsoft has spent the last 30 or 40 years convincing you, like concerted effort to convince you that it's a waste of time to ever look at the help. But I will tell you that the PowerShell help is actually pretty good. And, we always recommend Don Jones's book, PowerShell and As a Month of Lunches. Most people find that, coming to PowerShell as a great first book. But I will tell you that the documentation in the help is actually a pretty great start as well. So those are two great things. And then just explore, just have a sense of curiosity, have a sense of like, hey, what's going on here? And what you'll find is there's a certain set of things you have to learn, right? Get help, get command, get member, and kind of drop your preconceived notion. If you come to this like, hey, it's bash, or hey, it's like command.exe, and then it's not, you can get frustrated. So just kind of put that stuff aside, say, hey, it's a new thing, and I have to learn the new thing. And then what you'll find is there's like, I don't know, a couple, maybe a dozen things you really want to learn. And then all of a sudden you're able to predict and predict and predict and then be right, right, right. So again, if you don't bring your preconceived notion to it, you just learn the core concepts, you'll find that boom, you have this huge advance. If, however, you say, oh, it's not bash, it's not shell, you'll just struggle, and you say, oh, I don't know if I like this thing.
Awesome. Great stuff. I have, it looks like it's been plussed about 50 times or so. This is going to be an interesting question, I think. A lot of people are interested about the future of DSC. If you have any statements or thoughts on what may be happening with DSC in the future.
Yeah, so I just talked with Michael Green this week about that very topic, and we continue to invest in that area. Some of those investments, we had been wanting to open source the DSC agent for quite some time, and obviously some of our intentions there got subverted by events. In particular, Azure has had these huge contracts that we got, and that kind of stalled everything as we went to support those contracts. But we continue to invest in DSC, largely in the context of like making it great for Azure policy. By the way, just to be clear, DSC is used inside Microsoft everywhere, like everywhere. It's everywhere in Azure. And so it's, definitely a technology that's widely used, will be continued to invest in. And obviously we just have not been, we've done a poor job of setting and meeting expectations. So we sort of kind of feel bad about that. And we're more on the page of like, shut up until we until we're sure something is going to happen. We don't want to keep saying things and then not have them be the case. That's particularly around open sourcing of DSC.
Okay, great. And I'm also hearing in chat too. I appreciate the community bringing some extra answers of their own here. There was I'd almost call it like a sister conference here, just another one of these online PowerShell conferences that have happened recently. The PowerShell Europe conference recently had a very specific session on the future of DSC. So I think that's probably a 45-minute, 1-hour deep dive on that. If for all the people plus wanting questions about DSC, I would suggest you go check that out as well. That would probably be a really good resource for you.
Great suggestion. Someone's asking, can anyone give a real world account provisioning scenario where using a PowerShell class would be beneficial? I guess they don't use.
We're using PowerShell classes. Well, we did PowerShell classes for DSC. Right. So the idea here was, you write a DSC provider, right? So here's the thought of DSC, right? You write a script. Well, you write a script, it can do anything. And so what we observed was, if you think through make, by the way, there's all sorts of stuff around, chef, puppet, blah, blah, blah. Look, it's all just variations on make, right? Unix make. What Unix make says, hey, the world ought to look this way. Here's a test. Make sure it looks this way. And if it doesn't look this way, here's the rule to make it look that way. And then here are the dependencies. So check them as well, right? And so that pattern is basically desired state configuration. It's also chef, it's also puppet, etc. And then what we did was we said, hey, if you write scripts that way, get the world, set the world, test the world. right? And you're clear about the schema. Then all of a sudden we can build, we're clear about the error handling and the returns and that contract. With that pattern, we can change the world. Great. The challenge was that if you then went and said, hey, the thing that I'm setting and testing, I want to add a property or change a property, the fact that each one of those script methods, you had to go in and change and you had to get it exactly right, et cetera, was just a pain in the ass. Right. And so he did was he said, hey, you know what? Classes. Let's go do a class. And then it's very simple. The class has properties and those are the properties. And then it has methods, set, get, test. And then if you want to add a property, you just do it once and everything inherits it. So that's where we use classes a lot. Now, I will say it has been my desire that we go farther, farther, farther with classes. By the way, classes also clean up the kind of traditional, some of the messiness of the shell, right? We tried to bridge two worlds, interactive and programmatic. And there, I think we largely did a good job, but there's some things I think we did an exceptionally bad job on. Right. So the in particular, the fact that you can your script can emit output, and then if you say return, you get both the return object and the output. I mean, that was always kind of janky and horrible. And in a class that cleans that up. The only thing gets returned is the thing you return. Anything that gets emitted to the output stream gets thrown away. That's very nice. It's also much faster. It can be much faster because we don't do dynamic variable lookup. Dynamic variable lookup is when you use a variable, we'll first look in this scope, and if we don't see its value, we look in the parent and the parent and the parent. And then those lookups can be pretty expensive. And in classes, we don't do that. We use the traditional kind of programming language scoping rules, and that allows us to be a lot faster.
Awesome.
By the way, I'm kind of, again, blown away by the amount of resources that people are posting here just in the chat on Twitch about how to learn more about classes. So thank you everyone for doing that. I have another question here that I'd like to get your take on too. It's a pretty good one. So they're asking about, I've actually lost the question, but I think I have the gist of it. It's how do we think PowerShell itself will kind of help to drive the future of Windows Server? So obviously we see all the advances that I see in Windows Server. We also see all these advances in PowerShell supporting all that new functionality, and in many cases even enabling that. Could you maybe talk a little bit about what you see happening around that?
Yeah, so I'll say it's a mixed story. So at some level, we in the past we had the CEC, and the CEC was this point of convergence where we said, hey, everybody must. And then we were getting full PowerShell coverage because it was a must. So certainly we had a backlog of stuff that wasn't getting done, but anything new, it did that. And then when Satya came to town, he basically said, hey, everybody, stop talking to one another, stop bickering with one another, get out and go talk to customers and figure out what customers need and give it to them. And that really transformed the company. I think it has made us a much better company, a much more responsive company. It's just goodness in almost all ways. Almost all ways. That first part, stop talking to one another. What that meant was, hey, these arbitrary taxes like the CEC, put those things aside. If your customers aren't asking you for something, why are you doing it? Oh, okay. So now all of a sudden what that means is, now some people get it. Some people are like, hey, whether my customers get it or not, I know that they need command line interfaces. I'm going to go do one. Again, some people said, well, okay, I'm going to do PowerShell. Other people are like, well, I'll produce my own. And then others, they go and they talk to customers, and those customers don't say, hey, and I need X, Y, Z, and don't forget, I need PowerShell. And so they're kind of not doing it, right? So this is where PowerShell is a glue language. But look, let me just be clear. It would be a much better world if we still had the CECs demanding everybody go do this, right? But there is a point to be made that said, well, hey, if the customers aren't telling a feature team that they should do it, why is the feature team doing it? Okay, so next time a feature team asks you, what should you do about their area, don't forget to mention PowerShell. But this is where PowerShell as a glue language comes to bear, right? Remember, I said the world always has been, is, and always will be messy. So there's this innovation, and unfortunately, a bunch of that innovation isn't the way we'd like it to be. Well, the fact that PowerShell can call a command and parse the output, the fact that we can call a REST API and get the JSON and parse it, happy days. Would have been better if that REST API also included a PowerShell commandlet? Absolutely yes. But the fact that they didn't, well, hey, we're about trying to take that messy world and help you manage it, turn it into high-level task-oriented abstractions. So sometimes it's a native win, sometimes it's a win with a little bit of work.
So messy.
It is. It is. It is. If you stopped innovating, we could do it, or we stopped listening to customers. It's really ironic, I feel this like love it, hate it thing about that. What Satya has done, but I think that in all, I think everyone would have to agree it's a much better company because of it. And then we got this downside. Every plus comes with a minus.
Yep.
Awesome.
So,
Go
yeah, I
ahead.
have another interesting question going out on chat. I think the PowerShell team has talked about this topic before, but the question is, when will PowerShell 7 get baked into Windows, if ever?
Yeah. So let me say there's two thoughts here. One is that we believe that the world is going to and is a better place when you say, I will dynamically compose the world from different places, right? My joke was that when we were doing Nano Server, I said that the ultimate operating system is an operating system that has exactly one function: install optional module. And if you want to remove a module, you first have to load that module. You have to load the remove module, right? And that everything should be dynamically composed. And why is that? Because when we bake it into Windows, it's baked into Windows, right? Which is to say, that version as of that point of time. And now because it's in Windows, it went to 1 billion people. So when it's at 1 billion people, there's a group of people that say, wait a second, you're going to change something? This is going to 1 billion people. Like, I'm in charge and I'm going to decide what you get to change and what you don't get to change. And the default answer is effing no, right? What? And so we're like, no, it's really safe. Yeah. But F you, no, right? And they're just doing their job, right? They're trying to protect the world against the bell curve of developers who think they know what they're doing, but maybe haven't thought things through, and then they make a change and then screws up 1 billion people. So they're just doing their job. But we sort of know what we're doing. We sort of know what's safe. And the degree to which we say, hey, instead of it being baked in, if you just say, download this and install it, that means we can move fast. We can listen to you, get your bug fixes in, get your feature requests in, improve it better and better and better. So we think that's the better world, right? Now, that said, we know that there's a bunch of scenarios for why you bake it in. So we continue to look at it. There's no clear answer here. And the reason why there's no clear answer is because the .NET team gets a say in this as well. We are based upon .NET. So we cannot provide a support contract that isn't backed by .NET. And the .NET people, everything that I just said, they look at that and they say, times 10, like, yes, that's the right thing to do. And so they're very reticent to take something that's working very well for them, having gone cross-platform, moving very quickly, gone open source, getting customer feedback, moving fast as the wind, and then say, and then we're going to have a version that's ossified in the operating system, et cetera. So if they don't do it, we can't do it. So that's the state of that conversation. And we continue to have the conversation. So it's not a fixed deal, but currently we don't have a booked plan for getting it baked into the OS.
And I'll jump in here with the last question for you, and I'll throw you a softball here. So, what is your favorite ISE or development environment?
Oh, clearly, Visual Studio Code. Man, that thing's rocking. I got to say, in my career, and I've been doing this a long time, few times have I ever seen anything that is the rocket that is Visual Studio Code. I mean, these guys have just, they got the development model right. Their code quality is great. They're moving fast. That is just a rock star product. I mean, just hats off, hats off, hats off. I mean, that's a sort of a code project. It's like, you know what? You should take some of my bonus this year and give it to those guys. I mean, they're just doing such an awesome job. Really, I just think they're wonderful. And again, if you know, I know that our PowerShell support for Visual Studio Code had a bit of a rocky start. Honestly, we underfunded it, and it was problematic, right? We underfunded it, but we gave it to a guy who was doing a rock star job. So he's doing great, and so we thought we were great. But in reality, we should have been given him more support, better support for testing, better support for performance, etc. And then we got Tyler in there, and again, great work from the community, having open sourced. We now got the right set of resources who've really transformed that. So again, what I'm saying is, if you've ever tried Visual Studio Code with PowerShell, and then you didn't like it, it wasn't fast enough, it was buggy, etc., please try it again. I think you're gonna love it. And if you looked and you say, oh, but it's not ISE, you can now, there's this, I forget the command because I can't remember anything, but there's a way you say like PowerShell ISE mode, and it looks like ISE. It's crazy cool.
Fool yourself with it.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you again for that wonderful keynote, Jeffrey. I don't think I've ever seen such a down-to-earth keynote in my entire career. So thank you.
I screwed up so much.
Well, you know what? I think it's perfect because during a time like this, with all the stuff going on in the world, I feel like we all need to show a little more humanity. So thanks for being human, and thanks for taking the time out of your day. I know you have a busy day ahead of you, and I really, really appreciate you joining us today.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much. And you all
Yeah.
have a great conference. And I really invest in yourself. You're attending this session, these conferences. That's fantastic. You're doing exactly the right thing.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely.